She's probably looking for your uh, invitation.
Hi, Professor Douglas.
Oh, hi there. How are you?
Good, how are you? Thanks so much for joining us.
Sure.
Hi there.
Hello, Catherine.
Nice to meet you.
You,
Jack has been so excited about this interview, and I am too.
oh, great. I don't actually understand what this is, so maybe you can fill me in.
Do you want
Sure,
to, you could share your screen, Katie, if you want.
sure, sure. And this is Dee Dee Pierce.
This is,
Hi.
I'll do,
Hi.
I'll do some introduction. So this is Pamela Douglas, who is an award-winning writer with numerous credits in television drama. And she wrote a book that I read this year called Writing the TV Drama Series, which has been adopted in a lot of network mentoring programs and all over the world in many languages. And she has multiple Emmy nominations, and she is a member of the board of directors of the Writers Guild of America West. And so we're so happy that you joined us. I'm so excited to have you just for 30 minutes of your time. And then, yeah, I'll just introduce you. This is Katie Kavanaugh. She's a learning design and technology graduate from Stanford. This is her creation. She founded Screen 360. And then this is Dee Dee Pierce, who is a teacher of the year at Mountain View in high school in Mountain View, and she's a founder of Illuminate Film Festival for high school students. And Katie actually has founded 5 international film festivals herself. And I am a junior at USC studying cinema and business, and I'm a Warren Bennett scholar at USC. So just to get that out of the way, those are
Yeah.
introductions. Go ahead,
And,
Katie.
and may we record, Pamela?
That's fine. Sure.
Thank you very much. That's great. Oh, actually, Jack, you'll need to record.
Yeah,
Um,
it's recording.
and and then would you share the host with me and I can share my page?
Sure.
Sure. Um, by chance, have you had a chance, Pamela, to look at Screen 360 TV,
No,
the
I
website?
don't know anything about this.
Okay, good. We're going to present to you.
Okay.
Uh, s- um, Screen 360 TV is an online portal for the delivery of international films for young audiences. I've served on the international jury of the Berlin Film Festival's Generation section and have participated for 20 years, produced international film festivals in San Francisco through several Mill Valley Film Festival, San Francisco International, etc. And we find that now, more than ever before, especially during the pandemic, when so much empathy was sparked internationally, and also now with our, of course, uh, need for racial address, the world is also looking at us to understand what is happening here and reflecting on themselves. So it's an opportune time to extend education outside of our borders. And let me go to Screen 360 TV very quickly and present that to you. So it is, this is our MVP. If you've heard of the Eric Rice lean startup, he uses that terminology, a minimum viable product. And it is a website that is also the screening room.
And just to give you some background, Professor Douglas, we're in a Stanford pop-up class,
Yeah.
and we're trying to perfect the product market fit of this company, Screen 360, which we all are working for right now. And what I found, one of my favorite quotes that you said in the TV script analysis class that I took with you this past semester was that art produced in the international market can make it anywhere and everywhere with subtitles. And this is kind of what we're trying to do. We're trying to take international films and bring them to students in the United States to teach them, just to teach them that they don't live in a bubble, and to help students be cultural literate and have international peers, not only in their own state, but also nationwide and internationally. That's kind of our goal.
Good
So I
project.
can, thank you. I can show you a little bit, a couple of program items as soon as they come up here. Some things we're computer heavy. Well, you probably recognize some of the titles from the Berlin Film Festival, and maybe the Prix Jeunesse you're aware of, which
My
is
screen only says Zoom. I don't see anything from your screen.
let me see if the share is, thank you. How about now?
Yes, now it does.
Okay, great. Okay, this is the program page, but I'm seeing it's not coming up either through Zoom. Let's see if our schedule comes up. And that is, well, that's a little strange. Let's go back to the project. Um, I'm wondering if you are aware of the Prix Jeunesse in Munich.
I am really involved in television. The entire world of indie films and filmmaking is something that USC does in the production division. And also some writers do theatrical features as well. But from my point of view, the strength of the future is not in feature films, whether that's festival films or blockbuster mega films by the studios. Uh, it seems to me that the growth is all in television and in television allied uh, forms, such as games. So uh, none of the film festivals that are feature film related would actually be uh, my within my field, you might say. I may have heard of something, but I don't teach writing for those things, and
I
I
see.
and I tend not to be involved with them because they're too small. Um,
Uh-huh.
by small, what I mean is that my concern, uh, sociologically and in terms of and technologically, is really what gets to the greatest number of people. And the truth is that with Netflix and Amazon, for two examples, having such an enormous international reach, uh, the idea of the festivals seem a bit old fashioned to me. In fact, when I see students who want to write indie features, uh, a lot of times they're just self indulgent, or they're art forms. They're really art films, which are wonderful. I'm also a visual artist, and I applaud art. Uh, but that's entirely different from the communications force that you can get from television. So, probably if you're going to go through a number of film festivals around the world, it's not going to actually connect with what I do.
Yeah,
Okay.
I
Okay.
agree with that. And I told Katie that I think a good way to go about this would be to introduce shows and actually have episodes, because I think that's a greater way to engage students is with shows that last a period of time, not with one movie, um, which is interesting. And it's definitely a lane we could start to go down. I don't know what you think about that, Katie.
I think that's really interesting. Actually, it's been quite lonely in the film international film world in Berlin, for instance, and the Prix Jeunesse is a international television festival for young audiences in Munich that's been going on since 1964, and that's where I found the Americans,
Ah,
and so and that's where there's a lot of activity. So I've been running in a parallel world and stepping over and showing young audiences what their peers in other parts of the world are doing is an excellent idea. And I wonder, Professor Douglas, if you are aware of the exchange here that's already happening for young audiences in television.
No, it would be very interesting. I don't know that. If you read my book, you know that almost a third of the book is devoted to international television. It's not about education. It's really about the phenomenon that that at one time, American made television was what was seen everywhere. That when I
Mm.
traveled and gave seminars in other countries, I found that people had seen everything. Long, long ago, they were seeing, they meaning international audiences, were seeing products that were 20 years out of date. People in the outskirts of China watching I Love Lucy, which is big funny. Um, but in more recent times, because of streaming and because mostly of the internet, people everywhere have seen things more or less contemporaneously. As I mentioned in the book, that when The Walking Dead premiered, it premiered simultaneously in hundreds of countries all around the world at virtually the same time. And that's one of many shows that are really well known. When I teach television in international workshops, which I don't do often, but I've done that some, um, I've been preparing for students who have to be introduced to some of the major American shows, something, the classics, Mad Men, Sopranos, The Wire. Um, but I find that they've already learned them. They already know them. In fact, they know them perhaps better than American ones because they're precious. Now, I wondered how some of these students around the world have gotten these shows because actually their local television doesn't carry them. Um, Indeed, uh, there was a time. This was in a class in Africa where I discovered that everybody had seen Mad Men, which I thought was fascinating because at the time AMC did not have an outlet anywhere in Africa. But the students were so motivated that they were pulling it down from the satellite. Um, and
Oh.
I found that everywhere. Now, what has happened more recently is an enlargement of this of the scope of all of this international. It's no longer American products going outwards. It's also back and forth. I have a former student, a friend from Brazil, who got her MFA at USC in writing. Uh, Her visa expired and she got stuck going back to Brazil, which she really didn't want to do. But she got very fortunate, which is that Amazon said, oh, good, we need a person in Brazil who can access and work on developing of indigenous Brazilian films for use on Amazon internationally, worldwide. So she got very fortunate and she ended up in Brazil with a job with Amazon,
Mhm.
and that she still has. Now, that's not work that everybody's going to get, but I have advised some of my graduates who are from other countries that you don't have to stay here, that really, if you can find somehow the financing and any kind of backing in any other country, develop your show there and then come back around for the worldwide marketplace. It's not always easy to do because some countries don't have developed infrastructures to do that, or are afraid of it, or are so locked into old time tropes, mostly procedurals, cops and action adventure types of things, that they don't understand serialized storytelling. Uh, but I'm finding that more and more people do, and there are such tremendous markets around the world too. Not everybody, most people who are in the industry know that there's a tremendous business in Korea, South Korea. The whole
Mm.
K-pop has gone from
Mm.
music to also television, mostly soap operas, and very popcorny type of things, but there's a big market there. I was also interested to look at the Nigerian output.
Mhm.
They've got a huge movie industry. The television industry is not as sophisticated at all, but they've got a tremendous audience because people in Africa looking for dark actors have very few resources and
Mhm.
are enjoying the product of Nigeria. So they've got a big, big thing going. Um, there are other countries that are, that are militarizing, or you might say, even weaponizing screen drama. Uh, Turkey is an example where the propaganda machine is running through the drama series that celebrates the Ottoman Empire, and it
Oh,
is very popular. It's popular of all things in South America. For some reason,
mhm.
South Americans seem to love this Turkish television.
But
Um,
they also produce Noor. Is that not right? That was very
they do,
popular, wasn't it?
yes, 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 yes. Um, it's interesting to see what the impact is on a society of television shows, as we've
Mm.
found in India, for example.
Sure,
Um,
sure.
so there's a very live and active community of television makers that are truly international. Also, even if you look at it from an American point of view, uh, television staffs are now told to keep an eye on what would happen when the show goes international. That there are certain things that travel and certain things that don't,
Mhm.
and for financial reasons, they want to make sure their shows can play elsewhere. There are also tons of hybrids. I mean, you look at Game of Thrones, produced in Northern Ireland, with productions in many other countries. None of them in the U.S., although it's a U.S. owned show. U.S.
Mm.
HBO is an American company, but none of the production was here. The writing was all here,
I
interestingly.
have a,
Mhm.
I have a
The
quick
writing is
question.
almost always here, although the
Uh-huh.
physical production is elsewhere.
When I
Um,
joined this project, what made me think of you, Professor Douglas, was that class that we had on international TV, and we watched 3% from Brazil. We
Yeah,
watched The Kingdom set in 16th century Korea, and then we watched Dairy Girls, I think, from Ireland.
Ireland. Yeah.
And
yeah, that one's good.
you talking about how things travel, it was so interesting because the expectation of an audience is different everywhere you go.
Yes.
Um, but what remains universal are the themes that connect us as human beings, whether it be love or guilt or greed. And I think that that's kind of what we're trying to harness with Screen 360, whether we choose to go down the television path, because I think that is the future of telling stories is in TV in the episodic way that you can tell a story is so much more impactful than just a film. But I think through realizing rich cultures and also realizing that at the end of the day we're all human and we all experience the same day-to-day activities, I think it definitely could be a powerful company down the line if we realize who we should target and how we can create a film sort of curriculum for people to engage with.
Right. I certainly agree in the human universal issues, especially feelings and love, hate, all of that. There are specifics, though, that are particular to regions, and I always encourage writers who I work with uh, not to shy away from the specifics of any culture, but that it enriches the product. Um, there are also interests that differ a little bit. For example, in India, in parts of India, where the when a woman is married, she is expected to move into her husband's family's home. Uh, this is in traditional parts of India, of course, and uh, there, the big story is the mother-in-law story. That it's the new wife dealing with the husband's mom. And those are the stories that people want to hear about because that's what they deal with day to day. It's a storyline that wouldn't mean as much in other places, but I applaud the specificity of it. One of the other great things that Netflix has pioneered, and I'm not sure what they're doing with it now, but they started doing something that I consider very generous. It's probably also a business decision, though it's hard to see how they're making money on it. They went into areas that had no cable, that had no satellite, that had no television production, that had nothing. And instead of saying to them, look, buy our package of American shows and other shows from wherever, and we'll send you this great entertainment. Just pay us. They didn't do that. Instead, they sent a group of creative producers in to talk to the people and to say, what are your stories? What are the things on your mind? What do you need to tell? Um, and they came up with material that was way beyond what they thought they would get. It's not that they got the next Steven Spielberg there, um, or even necessarily great writing, but by partnering with people who had more skills, they were able to create or help create a completely indigenous material. Now, did all that travel to the US or elsewhere? No. Some of it is, not on a professional enough level, and some of it is not of enough interest to people elsewhere. But it means that they're growing a film and television literate population
Right.
in these places and giving opportunity for expression, at least locally. Now, there are two sides to this. And Netflix seems to be on the good side of this. There's a long history of cinematic colonialism that is bad, which is the imposition on cultures everywhere of the Euro-American bias or narrative.
Sure.
But the actual worst offenders in this area right now are China. In terms of what China is doing in Africa. China very strategically decided that they really want the minerals in Africa, and they want to be able to do mining and to make deals with elected officials and to not have opposition from the local populace. Some of this in the early times is done just by buying off local officials. But to really get a buy-in from the public, they determined that the thing to do was to create television for the local populace and to train, really educate, run a whole film education program or certainly a production education program for people in areas of Africa where they wanted to do the mining. And these areas were generally very, very far from any sort of technology. Some places they did not have electricity. They certainly didn't have any kind of, production mechanism. China brought this in. They wired those communities, paved the roads, and created television and educated the people who would run a television station. Now, the payload of all of this was that they ran Chinese television, Chinese very specific propaganda in the local language or subtitled in the local language about how wonderful China is. This is a benevolent country. Everything is good and beautiful. Now, the thing is, they got a little bit tricked because what happened was in some of these places, at least, the population got the electricity, they got the roads, They got the technology, they got the equipment, and went ahead and made their own stuff. Never mind the Chinese. So that's what happened in some of the places. It's not so simple. It's a hybrid experience, which is got a lot of bad stuff to it. But if you look globally at what's going on, it's a diverse story. It's Euro-American products going out. It's some products from other countries going to some places. And it's the increase of indigenous television making in some areas, often in need of help, actually. Um, I find that my book is, I was surprised at how many languages it was translated into and how many people were reading it around the world. One sort of poignant part of that is I get emails from people who've read it in some out of the way place saying, "You've inspired me. Now I want to create my own television series, or I want to write for television. What are my chances?" And realistically, there aren't any chances. So that's a little hard. But it's an exciting landscape right now, I would say.
Yeah. Let me ask you, from a writer's point of view, when maybe wanting to produce something new that is acceptable abroad, is there a need for testing with an international audience?
Nobody does that.
Nobody does that.
I don't think anybody. There used to be focus groups, and I guess there still are, where they get a bunch of people together in Las Vegas and show them stuff and have them rate it. First of all, there's too much material now to test everything. But also, I'm not sure those testing programs are reliable. I think people tend to go on gut instinct, and they also go on relationships with locals, like my friend Anna in Brazil, who was tasked with finding Brazilian material for the global marketplace. She's culturally multilingual. And they trust her, and that's the test. Are they wrong? Sure, they're wrong. Of course, they're wrong. Amazon, when it first started to exist in the U.S., made a big mistake. They decided they were going to crowd assess their new pilots and ran a contest basically where those who were looking at it could vote for the pilot they liked best. None of the democratically open this to anybody who wanted to do a pilot. Not a single one of those pilots ever made it to the air, and Amazon backed off into doing what everybody else is doing, which is to go to the professionals, and that's where we still are. Amazon is doing some great material and bold, surprisingly, shockingly bold material, including something like Transparent, which would never have gotten on a legacy network. So there's, but no, I don't think anybody that I know. Now, maybe stuff I don't know. Writers in general just write. You write and you're working with a production company. What they do is separate.
What I saw in Berlin over 20 years is very little participation from American filmmakers in this section, and so if they wanted to make films internationally, they might want to test with Screen 360 TV's audience, and we looked at that as a possibility for placing and learning an audience, understanding an audience.
Yeah, I don't generally deal with the marketing part of things, so I don't know too much about that.
Yeah, that's it. I want to let you know that it's 11:30, and if Jack might have some other questions, we want to be considerate of your time. Yeah.
I have a quick question. Okay,
Sure.
so our dilemma, is that we want to offer something to educators in the United States, and it's a fact that only about 20% of the population has a passport. Only about 30% of the population has a college degree, and we've got this huge country with a large public school system, and yet the world is getting smaller, is very globalized, and most of the country, I would dare to say, never interacts with someone who's different than them or speaks another language, etc. So we're trying to provide a service, a product, to take into the school systems to hopefully help mitigate some of that and yet introduce the world to kids, students, etc. And I guess maybe I'd like to pick your brain is like, how could we, first of all, there's all these things in the United States, regulations. Teachers have all these, standards. Every state's got a standard. There's tests and all these things. And so therefore, it's not really open to bring things that don't fit the curriculum. But yet there is a need that's bigger than the curriculum, and that is, cultural literacy, or exposure to international, students, people, etc. So what role could television play in servicing that need?
I think a huge role. I can't think of any better way to communicate with a generation that's grown up on screens. Um, and by screens, I don't just mean the computer, although lots of people are watching television on cell phones and on computers. I mean, the idea of, a box in your living room is not not current. But it seems to me that the greatest way to gain empathy for somebody else is to see their lives.
Right?
As a matter of fact, that's how television was invented. Way back in 1920, when the whole idea of televisio started. It meant vision at a distance, and the idea originally was that if people could see each other's lives, then wars would end. Now, we didn't do very well with that since the 1920s. And, uh, you know, but you have to start somewhere. And one of the problems of a movie is that it's 2 hours and it's over and it tells a neat story that has a single arc. You know, you want love, and at the end you gain or lose love, whatever it is. Uh, Whereas a television drama has such depth, and comedy too. I don't want to only talk, because comedy, while it tends to be culturally specific, also travels very well if it's really funny, if it's something that crosses culture. So whether it's comedy or drama, seeing what feels like real people who are not on a giant screen at some distant place where you're dealing with a fantasy, but seeing them in their families and in their concerns every day. I can't think of a better way to expose people to those who are different. Now, if reading subtitles is a problem, plenty of things are dubbed. Dubbing is always iffy, but it certainly exists, and it is a way to see 3% from Brazil, or to see something from Japan, or any other country. Speaking of countries with huge industries, Mexico, enormous output, enormous output. A lot of it is telenovelas, and that's very, very soapy. But if somebody wants to see something made in Spanish, or Spanish and English, there's a giant output there. I mean, the library is immense. So where do you start? I think I teach in college, of course, but it seems to me also in high school, you start with a viewing list. And the viewing list doesn't have to be whole episodes or whole series. They can be clips that expose students to something and let them then pick something that they like. I show lots of, well, back to the international things on that day that Jack mentioned. I showed maybe 10 minutes of 3%, but somebody who is interested can find it easily enough on Netflix and go watch it. And the same is true of many, many things that I show throughout the term, because there's no way to encompass everything that's out there. And then there are a few things I choose that I want students to see in full, whether it's Game of Thrones or whether it's Breaking Bad or lots of other things. So I would say just develop a curriculum of viewing, and it should be viewing plus discussion.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. And then read my book.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
It's not my book to the students.
I've read a lot of it. My last question, really quick. You kind of touched on it, but how would you recommend Screen 360 to get more screenwriters or teachers engaged?
Oh boy. Well, I think you need to reach out to people who have something to promote, because everybody's so busy.
Yeah.
There are plenty of authors who are also writers. My publisher is mwp.com, Michael Wisey, and there is a catalog on that publisher's website. And also in my book, I mentioned several people who have consultancies, and I think those people, might be interested because, basically they have a product they want people to know about. I think that'd probably be the best way. The Writers Guild also has committees of special interest for all sorts of subjects. Women writers, for example, Latinx writers. Every subject you could think of, and you could contact the committee and see if any of their members would like to come on.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Thank you so much
Great
for
advice.
joining us today, Professor Douglas. It's been our pleasure. We love your feedback.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, it's nice meeting you all, and I appreciate that you invited me.
Yeah,
Yes.
of course.
I
Would
look
you like?
forward to reading your book. Oh, go
Yeah,
ahead.
I'll introduce it to them. Would you like to know the outcome of Screen 360? Where
Oh, sure. Keep in touch. Let me know.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you. Have a great.
everybody should get my book and read it.
Okay.
Fourth
Will
edition.
do.
Get the third edition. Third edition's out of date.
Third edition.
Third edition. Okay.
Fourth
Great.
edition.
Have a good 4th of July.
Thank you, all of you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.